Welcome to Monday morning methane, the most exciting day of the week, the day that you wait for after every Monday, for Monday to come around again. I have a new tagline on every Monday morning methane, Coleman. Today we have Coleman Vollrath joining us from the University of Calgary. Really excited to hear a little bit of an academic perspective on methane emissions today and nerd out on some data, which appears to be, according to the data I've seen so far from the people watching these videos, everyone likes methane data. So Coleman, welcome to Monday Morning Methane. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Thomas. Appreciate the opportunity to talk today.
I know you have some data and slides, and we're going to get nerdy today on methane. But before we get into that, maybe tell the methane community a little bit about yourself, what got you into methane, why you're here today.
Yeah, you bet. Right now, I'm just about finished the third year of my PhD at the University of Calgary, and my PhD is in physical geography. But I think it sits, with the methane work, sits at kind of the intersection of atmospheric science and engineering, with maybe a little bit of geography in there, and then also some kind of regulatory and policy work. So I work in the Smart Emission Sensing Technologies Lab. My supervisor is Dr. Chris Hugenholtz, who is Thomas's former supervisor. So Thomas and I had a little bit of overlap while he was finishing his PhD and I was starting my master's, and that was 5 years ago. So yeah, I got into methane 5 years ago, and the reason why I chose to do methane and I think pick that option for grad school is because I was really interested in doing something positive in terms of mitigating climate change. And I thought using research on potent climate pollutant like methane would be a really excellent way to do that. And also, foster some relationships with industry and other folks to use and collaborate on reducing emissions.
I was wondering if you were going to out me for coming from kind of the same pedigree, because now everybody knows that nepotism is alive and real on Monday Morning Methane. We invite our friends to join the sessions.
Well,
But
I came because you said there's a free Highwood shirt, right?
oh yeah, I have to send
That's
you
right.
that in the mail after. You only get that if you successfully complete the trial of the recording.
Okay.
So
And
yeah,
I gotta buy software.
yeah, you do. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's $2 million. So
Okay.
I'll send you an invoice.
Sounds good.
So so I wanted to get into some of your work. You recently published a preprint,
Yeah.
which I thought was awesome and really enjoyed reading. That's kind of what instigated this having you joining for Monday Morning Methane. Curious, maybe you can take us a little bit for anyone who's not familiar with your work, kind of what you've been working on in your PhD, share a little bit about your approach, and then maybe even get into this paper a little bit and what you looked at and some of your findings as well.
Okay, awesome. So talk a little bit about what I've been doing for my PhD and then get a little bit into the paper that we just published in Environmental Research Letters. So my PhD research is a very small piece of a much bigger project called KERMET. And KERMET stands for Calgary Urban Methane Emissions Measurement Testbed. And this is what our lab at the University of Calgary is working on. It's a large-scale, multi-stakeholder project funded by the Canadian federal government. And what we're trying to do is better understand the sources and rates of methane emissions in cities and urban areas to inform future research and also mitigation of the emissions. So my colleagues are working on quantifying emissions from closed landfills, sewers, biosolids lagoons, wastewater treatment plants, and then I'm working on the natural gas side, and I've done a couple projects there in collaboration with the natural gas distribution company in Calgary. So talk a little bit about that, and then get into the review paper here. In terms of my PhD research, as I mentioned, it's a really small piece of this much broader KERMET project. And my first project was really involving the urban methane emissions review that I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But based on that review, I developed kind of the research program of my PhD around targeting some of the knowledge gaps related to methane from urban natural gas sources. So one of my first projects that I did was I quantified methane emissions from 37 residential natural gas meters in Calgary. Basically just canvassed family and friends and said, hey, can I come measure your gas meter? And I used a static flux chamber that you can see here on the regulator vents to capture those emissions. And then I used soapy water and a high flow sampler for leak detection and quantification on the meters. And I do have a corrigendum that was just published on Thursday for this. So I want to mention to our viewers that I'll be making a post about that very soon. And then my more current research has been quantifying total site level methane emissions at natural gas distribution facilities with Pullman's method. In the back of this photo here, you can see a natural gas distribution facility. And one of the gaps with these facilities right now is that they basically combust natural gas to heat it before before these facilities drop the pressure to distribution pressures. And those kind of incomplete combustion methane emissions are not well accounted for in kind of on-site component level measurements with, say, OGI and high flow. So I'm basically have adapted the mobile flux plane quantification technique to a human portable window washing pole based system. Basically bought this from Home Depot, and I run a hose off the methane sensor on my back all the way to the end of the pole, and I measure at different altitudes as I pass the facility to kind of create this screen or plane that captures the methane.
And if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken, Pullman's method actually originated during the Enlightenment and in the 1600s. Is that right? Or is this the one that you named after yourself?
yeah. This is our lab name for this method, and I
Uh,
think you second Pullman's on LinkedIn as well.
it rhymes with Coleman. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
That's awesome. Yeah, as part of this work, I did controlled release testing to understand the performance of this method as part of the Alberta Methane Emissions Program. I just have a small video for our viewers here. This was taken with OGI, and I hope it's not too hard on the eyes. You can see the methane coming out of the stack here, and then I'm walking by with the pole. Here it wasn't fully extended, but eventually it would be fully extended such that it would fully capture the plume vertically and then horizontally with the walking transect. So I spent 3 days smelling mercaptan downwind of this release stack, and happy to report that I think I have the right nose to work in methane.
So you came home to your kids smelling like rotten eggs at the end of
Yeah,
the day.
yep,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So
That's cool.
awesome. So yeah, that's a little bit about kind of what I've been up to. But Thomas, if it's okay with you, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the review paper now.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Awesome. So when I started my PhD and working within this KERMET project, something that our lab felt like was a good idea to do was take a broad survey of the literature on methane emissions from cities and urban areas in Canada and the US to understand what types of sources that we need to measure for this KERMET project. And then also what are some of the knowledge gaps that we might close with our research. So I just have a kind of small citation for the paper here. This was published last week in Environmental Research Letters and have the DOI here. This amounted to reviewing 106 peer-reviewed papers on urban methane emissions in Canadian and US cities. And the review is really comprehensive. It spans natural gas, solid waste, so landfills, composting facilities, and then wastewater collection and treatment. And a lot of different things on methane measurement are kind of integrated throughout the review, as well as kind of an evaluation of what types of mitigation is being done right now in these urban areas. One of the things that I kept track of from the studies that I read was there were a number of studies that quantified total city level or total urban methane emissions and then disambiguated by source type. So they kind of parsed out the emissions into what proportions coming from natural gas and then what proportions coming from, say, biogenic sources like landfills and wastewater treatment. And I won't get into, or maybe even wetlands. I won't get into kind of the specifics on the attribution methods today, but if you have at the city level an estimate of how much natural gas sources are emitting, you can then use natural gas consumption data in that urban area to estimate a methane loss rate or an intensity for downstream and the gas use in the urban areas. So several studies reported this kind of natural gas methane loss rate metric, which you see on the y-axis here. And the way to interpret this is basically it expresses the quantity of methane that's emitted, expressed as a percentage, relative to a unit of consumed methane, which would just be natural gas corrected for methane content. The x-axis shows the different studies that I extracted the parameters from. So the kind of nomenclature for these as well here is just San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Washington and Baltimore, Boston are those. And then across these studies, the mean natural gas methane loss rate was 2.3% with a standard deviation of 0.9%. And I found that when the studies reported this metric, it was often a lot larger than kind of bottom up estimates of downstream methane loss rates. So what I did, you can see in panel B here, I went in and I grabbed the US EPA greenhouse gas inventory data for natural gas distribution emissions. So that would be kind of pipeline leaks and customer meters, and then end use emissions. So the proportion of this loss rate here, the hatched proportion is basically distribution, and then the non-hatched portion would be end use. And then I took gas consumption data from the US Energy Information Administration for residential, commercial, industrial, and vehicle consumers in the US, assuming these are urban users of gas. And then I calculated using those data a loss rate of 0.4%. So this gives you kind of an idea of what a bottom-up estimate of kind of downstream losses would be. And then I also included here One Future. So that's a low methane industry group in the US with member companies that span upstream, midstream, and downstream natural gas segments. So their member companies on average reported a methane loss in the distribution sector of 0.1% for 2023. You can see here compared to the mean that I extracted from the studies, which show kind of a top-down measurement of natural gas loss rate, it's a lot larger than what we're estimating with bottom-up estimates.
Coleman, I just realized we blew through 16 minutes and LinkedIn was not going to allow me to post this video now unless I edit it down. So do you have any, it's super interesting. We could talk about this for hours. Any kind of final words of wisdom in kind of 30 seconds or less for the audience?
Yeah, final words of wisdom. The review that we did generally shows that natural gas is a large source of methane emissions in cities and urban areas. But something that I'm finding is that measurements of individual sources like gas meters, gas distribution facilities, those rates can vary from city to city quite substantially. So I think that it supports the need for highly granular measurements kind of at the asset level from city to city, from gas distributor to support mitigation and good emissions modeling.
Coleman, thank you so much for joining us on Monday Morning Methane. It's been a pleasure. Everyone, please follow Coleman on LinkedIn. And if you have any questions about his research, please ask them in the comments. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, Coleman.
Awesome. Thanks all for having me.